For those of you that I don't know, my name is Claudia Flores. I'm the director of the International Human Rights Clinic. Thanks for joining us today in one of the 3 sessions that we're hosting for folks thinking about taking the clinics in the next academic year to give you a good sense of what the clinics are about, how they're structured, what you'll learn, and how they will contribute to your development as lawyers. So today we are going to be covering quite a lot of ground. So unfortunately, we're not going to have time for questions. You'll see in the chat that I have included just basic instructions about registering for the clinics in the fall. I've also included the names of the clinic directors that will be speaking today, along with their emails. So please feel free to send any of us questions as follow-ups. Maybe by some miracle, we'll have a couple minutes for questions, but I know ourselves and my colleagues and our students, and I bet we're going to take the full amount of time. So today we're going to be hearing from the Civil Rights Police Accountability Clinic, from the International Human Rights Clinic, from the Immigrants Rights Clinic, from the Exoneration Project, and the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Project Clinic. Each clinic has about 12 minutes to speak. I understand some of the clinics will have both the faculty and the students speaking, so you can get the perspective of the students as well. We are going to start with the Civil Rights Police Accountability Clinic. I see Professor Futterman has joined us. Nino Garuli, who co-teaches the clinic with me, she is going to be keeping time, but she's only going to be keeping time towards the end. So if everyone could just be mindful of how your 12 minutes are running with the multiple speakers. Nina will, in the chat, give you a 5-minute warning and tell you when your time is up, basically. All right, so why don't we start with Professor Futterman. If you need to share your screen, you should be able to do so. If you have any difficulties, just let me know. We'll go in the order on the program. So the Civil Rights Police Accountability Clinic, then the Human Rights Clinic, Immigrants' Rights, Exoneration, and the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Project. And with that, I will step back and transfer it to Professor Futterman.
Thanks, Claudia. So I get a call one day, late one afternoon, and I'm about to quit work for the day, and my phone rings, and it turns out it's somebody from Chicago law enforcement who's looking for our help. They tell me about a police shooting where 2 officers drove up on a 17-year-old boy, a boy who had a small knife in his hand. And within seconds of jumping from that car, one of the officers shoots the boy as he shies away toward a construction fence in an abandoned industrial area. The boy falls to the ground. The officer then adjusts his aim directly down at the boy who's lying on the ground, and he empties his magazine into the boy's body, just as the boy lay in the street, writhing in pain. 16 shots. The caller, they tell me it looks like an execution, and like he shot that boy like he was just a dog in the street. Hey, am I back?
You're back.
Okay, sorry. It's the Zoom world. There's video. And the caller, they're worried that this is going to be covered up like so many other shootings have been covered up, and they just pled with me to please help. As y'all probably realize, the boy's name was Laquan McDonald. And for my students and I, that call launched an investigation and advocacy that provided the greatest hope for real and enduring change in Chicago in my lifetime. Our students' work that led to the release of that horrific video helped to lift up the reality of systemic police abuse of Black folks into broader visibility, challenge our nation to reckon with that reality. And this made like international headlines. That call and our students' work supporting our clients' work on the ground led to a new mayor here in Chicago, led to the election of Kim Foxx, the first Black woman ever to serve as chief prosecutor, state's attorney here in Chicago, the first criminal prosecution ever of an on-duty officer for killing a Black man, woman, or child, actually then leading to the murder conviction of Jason Van Dyke for killing Laquan McDonald. And certainly not least, a federal consent decree over the entire Chicago Police Department to address its decades-long pattern of brutalizing Black, brown, and poor communities with impunity. Y'all, as Claudia said, my name's Craig Futterman, and I appreciate y'all having me here in this virtual world, and to share a little bit about our clinic with y'all. Civil Rights and Police Accountability Clinic. We were the first clinic of its kind in the nation, long before this kind of stuff became vogue, when Professor Randolph Stone, one of my heroes, launched this project with me about 20 years ago. And we strive to be a grassroots, ground-up, community-based law school clinic. Never forgetting, our law school feels walled off from, and is walled off from, surrounding community, part of historic Chicago's South Side Woodlawn community. Our work by design, fluid, ever-changing, trying to be responsive to community need. But our mission is consistent from day one, and that's to improve police accountability, service in Chicago. We challenge racism in policing and in our criminal system, all the while trying to teach students all that it means to be lawyers, all that it means to be a lawyer. Three basic components of our clinic: litigation, policy, community. We represent people who've been abused by the police, who have no other means to access justice. We bring proactive civil rights lawsuits, challenging police abuse. Sometimes we sue the system, so to speak. Our work's predominantly in federal courts. We do some stuff in state courts, including partnering with someone who I think you also hear from today, Professor Herschel Conyers, and her criminal and juvenile justice clinic, to defend kids and adults, young adults charged with crimes in cases that involve police abuse. That's where at least we interact. And indeed, we're partnering on a case right now where our 19-year-old client was shot by the police, and he now sits in Cook County Jail at risk of COVID while being charged with attempted murder. Second, policy. We develop advocacy strategies to improve our policy and practice, to facilitate change. At the same time that we represent real folk in need, our students constantly ask how and why questions, like how is it that a group of officers were able to target another client, a 50-year-old mother in Chicago public housing, and to target her for sexual abuse, confident that nothing would happen to them. What underlying conditions and structures made that a possibility? Community, and that's most of all where I started. We strive to be a grassroots project that's rooted in and fundamentally accountable to the communities that we serve. Community-based clinic driven by what's up on the ground, and one that supports community-led advocacy. And we also strive to build that community within our clinic, obviously, where we can strongly disagree with one another, and we do, and support one another at the same time. Example, two of our clinic students gave, after just hearing them deliver probably one of the most powerful oral arguments I'd ever seen, and one that established as a matter now of law in Illinois that police misconduct records belong to the people. We partnered with the Woodlawn-based nonprofit Invisible Institute to make, just to give you a sense of the kind of community work, to make that legal precedent real. And together we built a database called the Citizens Police Data Project that gives everybody access to information about CPD complaints, police complaints, all the way that date back 50 years to the present. And never been anything like that at all in our nation that represents a fundamental redistribution of power from police, from the state to community. And you can check out some of that work at, not our website, but at the Citizens Police Data Project, cpdp.co, that website that we created. So your role, students' role, y'all do everything. From developing case strategy, interviewing witnesses, counseling clients, discovery, depositions, trials, examining witnesses, writing, researching briefs, arguing before trial courts, appellate courts. We even had a case that was up before the Illinois Supreme Court, just actually is pending there right now, that students just submitted a brief within the last month or so seeking to prevent the destruction of hundreds of thousands of police misconduct records. Try civil rights cases before juries, criminal cases as well. Students do opening, closing arguments, put on witnesses, testify before legislative bodies, write policy, draft legislation, even present to the media and advocate publicly, leading community workshops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Y'all do it all. Just, you know, maybe just to, the thing that I'd say that probably most occupies students in the clinic at this moment, more than anything else, flows directly from that call that I shared at the beginning, and that's the Chicago Police Consent Decree that we helped to create. And probably the most important and historic part of the decree is our clients, coalition of people most impacted by police violence and discrimination, that together we won the power to enforce this consent decree in federal court, a direct line with an independent monitor and federal judge who's overseeing the police department for what can be the next decade or more. And that's the first time that community enforcement has ever been written into a government consent decree involving a police department in the US. Last week, to bring it home, we had one of these Zoom meetings with the brand new superintendent of police in Chicago, and it was a sight to be seen, because you have to imagine, again, a meeting like this, we have all these folks in these little boxes filled with top CPD brass and their white shoe lawyers, the mayor's office, clinic students, and then our many clients from organizations like Black Lives Matter Chicago, the West Side chapter of Chicago, of the NAACP, Latinx neighborhood associations, community groups, women's advocacy groups. And then one of our clients, she stands up and looks in the computer screen directly at the police chief. And she says, "Chief, give us a list of everyone you," and she said the word "you" when referring to the entire Chicago Police Department, "give us a list of everyone who you've shot, killed, and raped in the last few years. I want you to know each of their names." To which the chief then turned to his first chief deputy and said, "Get right on that." And I mean, it was just truly a thing of beauty. And so it's up to us to do exactly what our client just did in our first meeting with the new police chief, and that's to make that real. I want to end, well, first let me just give you my website and contact info. I mean, please, or I should say, just please go on our clinic's website, click on the Civil Rights and Police Accountability Project, and take a look at the kinds of work that you'll be doing. I encourage you to look particularly at our project history that really gives a vivid sense of the work that the clinic is doing and has done. You can also feel free to email me or give me a call with questions. But I guess I want to take my final, I'll say, minute just to address the elephant in this virtual room. And that's obviously the COVID pandemic. That's created a series of incredible challenges, both to our advocacy and to our teaching, as this Zoom meeting highlights. I mean, none of us want to be talking with you all remotely through extreme social distancing right now. In the last 2 weeks, I think I've mooted more interviews and oral arguments over Zoom than I ever imagined. And I don't want to pretend that it's the same, and I'm not going to pretend that it's equal. It isn't. But it is part of what I think makes a great lawyer, how we adapt to the challenges we face in seeking justice with our clients. And together we're learning to prepare and imagine some new normals and paradigm shifts. The work of our clinics, any of our clinics, is not stopping. We're fighting right now to get people out of jail, out of prison, human cages, petri dishes for the disease. We continue to fight to eliminate unnecessary police, negative police contact, stop searches, arrests that place both the people arrested and law enforcement in grave risk. And I also refuse to minimize all the bad things that can happen, from death, loss of jobs, insecurity, hunger, homelessness, violence. I can't imagine for y'all, I'll say that it has already touched my own family in the most fundamental ways, including killing people who I love. But we're not all equally impacted by this disease. Racism, social inequality continue to determine who's most at risk, who lives, who dies. And I guess I want to end that while the pandemic has brought so much tragedy and insecurity to so many of us, but particularly Black, brown, immigrant, and poor communities, clients who we work with each and every day. At the same time, it's forced us, it's forced so many of our practices, the practices and habits and customs that we take for granted, both the good stuff and the bad, to stop, to just stop. That's the nature of the pandemic, or at least to slow to a crawl. The law of momentum requires us first to stop before we can change directions, that we have to stop before we change. And it's also a time that I try to be hopeful, because as awful and painful as this pandemic is, it's created the opportunity for us to stop and question what we've always done, and work together to create something better. And that's what I hope to do, and I look forward to working with you all next fall, whether in person or remotely, if we're going to be honest with one another, to do just that. And I really welcome your questions.
Great. All right. I am going to cede most of my time to the students in the clinic so you can hear from them. But just quickly, as I said, I'm Claudia Flores, the director of the International Human Rights Clinic. For those of you not familiar with the human rights system, its premise is that individuals should or do have basic rights, regardless of the government that they happen to live in. The system was created after World War II, well, we all know what happened in World War II, but the goal of the clinic is to work with advocates and clients globally to fight injustices. And it is premised on the recognition that there are certain injustices that actually cross boundaries and tend to be remarkably similar in different countries. The projects that we take on are grounded in the idea that advocacy can be broad and that legal advocacy is most effective when it uses all of its tools. So litigation, legislative advocacy, policy advocacy, public awareness raising, using the media in the right way, and that social justice efforts are most effective when they're done in coalitions of some kind. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, Rachel, and Eric, who will tell you a little bit about some of the work that they've been doing in the clinic and their experience of it. And I want to remind everybody to please look in the chat, as Nino says, that there will be a 5-minute warning and then the final warning, just so we can keep to time. Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Hey everyone, like Claudia said, I'm Sean. I started with the clinic as a summer intern, and then I've been in the clinic all of this year, my 2L year. And I can honestly say it's one of the more rewarding parts of my time at UChicago. So basically my project that I'm on right now, we're working with Freedom House, which is an organization, a civil rights organization that works globally, but we're specifically working with their DC and their Tanzania offices. And it started off as a project where Tanzania's seen a lot of civil liberty disruption recently with freedom of the press and association issues, as well as some separation of power issues. And so Freedom House had us help create a manual that basically guides new attorneys or attorneys that are switching into litigation, how guides them through the process of pursuing strategic or impact litigation, which has been an awesome experience. One, because you get to learn a lot about how to actually pursue impact and strategic litigation, something that you don't really have a chance to do when you're a law student usually. And also it's a ton of research and writing, but it's not the type of research and writing where you're just like sitting at your computer all day and like staring at, 10 law review articles in a row. It's a lot of, we like go out and talk to actual civil rights attorneys in Uganda, in Tanzania, in England, and get their testimony and learn from them directly, as well as Claudia and Nino, who obviously have a ton of experience with this. But so we get to talk to a lot of like actual workers. And then the other part of the project was creating, structuring that manual into a teaching session that was supposed to take place over the course of 2 days or so in Tanzania. Unfortunately, of course, because of COVID, we were not able to end up going. But basically, we had created this module where we were going to help teach new attorneys, or again, attorneys that were switching into litigation, how to actually go about their cases. We did get to do some of the module via Zoom to some of the Freedom House partners in DC. We're still, pushing along with the module and planning to be able to present it one day. But yeah, I would say, it's been an incredible experience. You learn a ton, and yeah, I would say that the number one thing is like actually getting to work and speak with attorneys worldwide who are dealing with these huge issues, dealing with human rights and civil rights violations in their countries and internationally, and actually learning directly from them is kind of irreplaceable. I can turn it over to Rachel for her project.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel. I'm on a team that's working with the International Labor Organization, which is a UN agency. Our project is on the wage gap between migrant workers and national workers, which the ILO actually spent a lot of time sort of quantitatively documenting, and we've been working with them to fill in a lot of the qualitative aspects of why this wage gap exists. And we've kind of ended up along the way broadening the project to why general inequalities in labor attainment exist for migrant workers. So one of the things that I've found very fulfilling about this clinic work is that we've done a lot of different types of work. So we spent a lot of time writing memos on the wage gap in different countries, as well as the overarching systems of international law and EU law that are governing these labor laws. So a lot of it has been independent research and writing, but then we've also been working in partners and doing memos in partners. So I think that it's been really exciting to not just develop my independent writing, but also to learn how to work with a team. We've met both with Claudia and Nino, and then on our own each week. So it's exciting to sort of structure how we want the project to go forward as students, but also get really good feedback from Claudia and Nino. And then we were supposed to, over spring break, go do interviews in Spain and Belgium, but we have, because of COVID, had to adapt to doing those interviews over Zoom. And getting to write the questionnaires and then interview government members, civil society members, union representatives has also been very exciting. So overall, I think it's a really great clinic to develop a very sort of broad range of skills while also looking really intensely at a specific issue and sticking with it for the entire year. And I'm gonna go to Eric.
Hello, I'm Eric. So I'm a 2L. I've been working in the clinic for about 18 months. I started out as a summer intern, and I've been doing my whole 2L year. So I'd tell you guys a little bit about the work I've done, and then mostly focus on what I've gotten out and learned at the clinic. So spent those 18 months writing a report for the ACLU on America's use of prison labor. So I spent the summer going over FOIA documents from all 50 states, and then I've spent the year conducting research as well as interviews with people who are experts in the prison labor system, including people who experience themselves as prisoners. So that also meant going down to Louisiana during the fall to spend about a week interviewing folks largely who had been incarcerated in Angola, which is the nation's largest maximum security prison. So in terms of what the clinic has done for me, also Rachel, I'm just doing this staring at your face. It's really funny. You're the only person whose video I see. I'm sorry. So I get to tell you so much about the clinic. So those 4 things. I have written a lot, somewhere between like 1 million and 1 billion pages. I think the clinic is probably double or triple what I've written in every other class. And that's been great. During my 1L year, my legal research and writing professor told me that legal writing should feel like getting hit by a truck. And I feel like the clinic has gotten me closer to my writing, being a truck. I feel like a much more competent and confident person now that I've been in the clinic. I've been yelled at by the director of communications in the Louisiana Department of Corrections. I've spent 9 or 10 hour days interviewing people who spent 50 years wrongfully incarcerated in one of the nation's most disgusting prisons. I just feel much more ready to be a person when I leave law school. I also feel like an expert on prison labor to the extent that any 27-year-old can claim to be an expert on anything. It is this really balkanized system where each prison and each prison system in each state is kind of this own bizarro fiefdom. So there really is no comprehensive report on prison labor. And now I feel I get to be one of the people who has that knowledge, which has felt really, really special and made me really excited to go be an advocate after law school. And then the last thing is just going through my 1L year, I came to realize how important it is in law school to just have a person in your corner, to have a professor, really believes in you, is going to be a mentor. And both Claudia and Nino have been that. When I worked in the clinic over the summer at one point, they sat me down and said like, so what do you want to do with your life? And we talked for something like 2 hours. I didn't know I had 2 hours of things to say about my life. So yeah, from writing to just learning about the substantive law to learning how to be a better advocate, the clinic has been a really fulfilling experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. So you should join the International Human Rights Clinic to get hit by a truck and yelled at by people. And just in the 1 or 2 minutes that I have left, I think, the students gave you a really good sense. It's the Human Rights Clinic does a lot of what we would domestically call civil rights. And then we do socio and economic rights. So that's the right to health, right to education. And the work has really varied from year to year. We are right now in the process of submitting amicus briefs in a bunch of solitary confinement cases domestically. We've worked for the defense team for a detainee in Guantanamo. We've done a lot of fact-finding work. And distance learning will be interesting. In a way, we're really well suited to do it because a lot of our work is global already. And so I think the clinics overall are going to adapt in a really interesting way. It also allows us to work in a lot of countries that we can't travel to because they're too dangerous. So that's one of the things that we've been thinking about for next year as well. But the goal is really to think of advocacy in its broadest way and to really improve and dramatically improve your capacity both in legal writing and as oral advocates. Okay, so I will leave it there, and please do email us if you have any questions. And next, we have Nicole Hale from the Immigrants Rights Clinic.
All right, hi everybody. So like Professor Flores said, I'm Nicole Hale. I direct the Immigrants Rights Clinic. And our goal is to represent immigrants and immigrant communities in both Chicago and around the country. Immigration law is one of those fields that I think a few years ago was potentially considered a little bit obscure, but that in the last couple years has really grown from kind of a niche area of law into something that we hear about on the news all the time. There are developments all the time, and that's likely, only to grow in importance over time. So, there are millions of people in this country that are subjected to our immigration system. Most of them do not have legal representation. And so there's a huge need for attorneys to represent immigrants, to try to give them the representation they need to really navigate a complex and at times extremely draconian system where a single misstep can mean the difference between staying here with your family and living the life they want to lead and being deported to another country forever. So I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the projects that we currently are working on in the clinic, just to kind of give you an idea for the kind of work we do. One of the things I try to do is to take on a wide variety of different kinds of projects so that you all will get the kind of experience both in the immigration field, but also experience that you can then use in any other kind of area of civil litigation that you might go into. So we do take cases, individual cases of immigrants who are facing deportation, and then we're representing them in immigration court, which is an administrative proceeding. But we also take on cases in federal court. Affirmative impact cases where we're trying to change the law in immigration for the better, we think. And in those cases, we're dealing with the same litigation system that you would be litigating in any other kind of civil litigation that you might be involved in. I'm going to try to share my screen. So I'm going to talk about 3 different projects that we're working on currently, just to give you a sense. And then I'll talk a little bit about what you might expect the experiences you might expect to get if you were to take the clinic. So hopefully this works. Do people see Claudia, is it showing? Okay, great. All right, so so I want to talk about a case that we're working on right now. People may have heard of something called the Patriot Act, which was passed right after 9/11 in response to those terrorist attacks. And the Patriot Act contains a lot of different provisions. But one of the provisions in the Patriot Act allowed the government to detain immigrants, non-citizens, indefinitely after any criminal sentence might end, if they were determined to be a risk to national security. So this is a civil detention authority that has never been authorized in the United States previous to this. This was sort of a new power that the government claimed for itself. And the government actually, even though this was passed, I don't know if other people hear that, but nonviolent offenses related to providing money to Muslim charities abroad, which the government connected to various terrorist groups. But he was never himself accused of any sort of terrorism offenses, but he did write these checks. He served his federal sentence, and when he finished serving his federal sentence, he was transferred into immigration custody in 2017. Unfortunately, he's a stateless Palestinian, and there's no country that the government can remove him to. And so he's been in this state of limbo where the government claims the authority to hold him indefinitely for the rest of his life because the government has determined him to be a national security risk. Just to give you a sense for what the students have been working on in this case, they will be participating in the federal trial that we have in June, both the summer students and some of the students who are in the clinic this year. They've handled oral arguments in federal court. They have interviewed witnesses. They've done various discovery tasks to kind of get our case together. We are right now working on our pretrial memo, and they're the ones writing it. They are doing the client contact. They're interviewing the client. They're having weekly calls with him. So the students have really been involved in every step of this case. And this is a case that has national importance, that will set precedent, that will be important for many years to come, not just with respect to our client, but with many people. And again, the students have been on the front line of that. Another case that we picked up that's related to COVID-19, and if you went to the session where we talked about this might seem familiar to you, but you can see on the left there's been a report of various coronavirus cases in immigration custody. And in fact, the first coronavirus death in immigration custody happened at the Otay detention facility in San Diego, near San Diego. And and there's been a huge outbreak at the facility. And so we are working with an organization called Ultralato, which is a border rights organization, to try to get information from the government about how they're protecting immigrants from COVID-19. And because the government has refused to give us any information, we plan to sue them in a couple of weeks to try to get that information. So again, this is not a case local to Chicago, but it's a case of national importance about an issue that is affecting immigrants all over the country. And then the third thing I want to talk about, we also, we have these national cases that we work on, but we also really want to focus on immigrant communities in Chicago. And so we are representing immigrants in Chicago. Many of them are from Central America, families who have fled conditions in Central America and have then, once they entered the United States, sought asylum, have relocated to Chicago. And so we are bringing those cases in immigration court and arguing that those individuals should be able to stay. So, one thing I want to say about these immigration cases, as you can see from the cases that we are bringing, many of these cases are life and death cases. So when we're talking about asylum, sometimes a decision to deny someone asylum is a life or death decision. If that person gets, deported to a country where they fear persecution, that person may die. We are dealing with cases in which people are facing ostensible life sentences. So our client in the Patriot Act case, if we lose that, he will be detained for the rest of his life. If we lose our COVID-19 case, there will be people who die in detention because the government isn't protecting them. And so these are really life or death cases that we are taking, and that the students are instrumental in winning. So I had a case in February. We went to trial It was a young man, a farm worker who the government was trying to deport. He had a wife and a 4-year-old daughter here. He was from Guatemala. She was from Mexico, both undocumented immigrants. What that meant is that if we lost the case, there was no country for them to go to live. They would have been separated forever. Their family would have been irrevocably broken. I had a team of 3 students handle that trial, and we won. And I can tell you that there's nothing more rewarding than seeing a family hug and knowing that they will be able to be together because you worked on their case and you won their case for them. It's extremely rewarding work. In addition, you're going to be able to learn a wide variety of skills that you're going to be able to take and do and use for whatever kind of law you go into, even if you have a passing interest in immigration, but that's not necessarily what you want to go into. Like I said, we do client interviewing, fact investigation. I have students taking depositions right now. We're writing briefs. They're doing trial. All of these are skills that can transfer to basically any other area of litigation that you're interested in. The other professors have talked a little bit about our plans for the fall. Obviously, I think all of us are sort of, not sure what the fall is going to look like. But what I can say is that work on behalf of immigrants has not slowed down in the wake of COVID-19. In fact, we have more work than ever. The government is using the coronavirus crisis in order to step up deportations as opposed to stop deporting people. And so there is going to be lots of work to do in the fall. We are gonna continue to do the really important work that we're doing. It may look a little different than it normally does, but it will be happening regardless of what the law school experience looks like in the fall. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to speak with you offline if you have more specific questions about the clinic. Thank you.
All right, great. So let's go to the Exoneration Clinic. Carl, Professor Leonard.
Thank you. So I'm Carl Leonard. I help run the Exoneration Project clinic here at the law school. So our clinic represents people who are innocent but were convicted anyway. And our job is to try to reinvestigate their case and see if we can get them out of prison. Most of our cases are here in Chicago, but we do have cases nationwide, and we have students working on those cases nationwide. So our focus is working on cases with individual clients, real people, representing them in court. We, unlike some other projects, we don't focus on lobbying or trying to change the laws that resulted in a wrongful conviction. Definitely respect that work, but that's just not our focus. Similarly, we aren't limited in terms of only taking cases that involve DNA evidence or only taking cases that have some exonerating forensic evidence. A lot of our cases have that. A lot of them don't. So we take really a wide variety of cases and represent individuals with a real litigation focus. We expect to be in court, and our hope is to win there. So a little bit about the background in terms of what our cases look like and why I think the odds are really stacked against us, which I think makes it challenging and makes it kind of fun, is that if you think about a crime, and I'm going to pick on one of our students, Tyler Downing, who's going to talk in a minute, but at some point, so a crime happens to me, and I call the police and say, Tyler did it. I'm a reasonable person. Hopefully, I have some reasonable reason to think that it was Tyler. So the police start investigating Tyler. They talk to other witnesses who say Tyler did it. So the police get a warrant. A judge says, yeah, there's probable cause to go arrest Tyler and bring him in and talk to him. Tyler ends up being maybe indicted by a grand jury where these grand jurors sat and heard the evidence. They say that they should bring a case against him. Tyler files various motions to suppress statements or to quash his arrest or dismiss the indictment or something like that. A judge hears all the arguments, considers the facts, considers the law, and Tyler loses, has to go to trial. 12 jurors come in. They all agree that Tyler's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt after they've heard all the evidence. Tyler probably filed some post-trial motions pointing out various errors that happened at his trial. The judge said, no, looking at all the law, this conviction is valid. So Tyler appeals, goes to the first level appellate court. where the 3 judges look at it and they say, no, this is looking at all the law, considering all your arguments about what errors you say happened. No, you don't have any good arguments here. So he appeals to the state Supreme Court, loses, appeals to the US Supreme Court, loses. And then probably by the time we're involved, filed some various collateral remedies, we call them. So tried a federal habeas petition, tried a couple of state post-conviction petitions, lost all of them. So by the time we get involved, dozens of reasonable people have looked at Tyler's case and said, that guy's guilty. So we have a really hard task to prove that that's not the case. And we involve students in sort of every aspect of that, from intake, which is something we were working on this quarter, where we get all these letters and phone calls and things from people who say, I'm innocent, so you should take my case. We do evaluation of those. Students are involved in that. We meet with clients. And eventually, we decide to take a case, and students are involved in investigating. And I think investigation is a lot of fun. We've been limited this quarter in terms of how much investigating we can do because we haven't been able to go out and talk to people. But you get to go talk to witnesses and see what they have to say. And sometimes it's really successful in bizarre ways. I was at a Dunkin' Donuts one time, and this guy decided to confess to murder and signed a notarized affidavit at Dunkin' Donuts over coffee, confessing to murder. And plenty of times we get told in less delicate terms that we should go away and never come back again. But hopefully we put together evidence that supports that this person is innocent. And it has to be new. That's the main thing that we have. It can't be something a court already considered. It can't be something that Tyler or his lawyer could have found out if they'd been diligent. It has to be something totally new that we discovered. So a lot of our focus is on investigation and finding that evidence. Sometimes it's DNA evidence. Sometimes it's a witness who says, I lied. Sometimes it's evidence, and we see this a lot. Professor Futterman talked about it, that the police were engaged in a lot of misconduct, in this pattern of misconduct. We have a lot of cases that deal with that. So we'll seek forensic testing if we can, try to get DNA evidence. And eventually, hopefully, we can put together what we call a post-conviction petition, and the students help write that, which has all this new evidence, and that tries to get us back into court. And each state has a different procedure. Some are more favorable than others, but we file this petition, we try to get back into court, and then we fight it out with the state. The state will try to dismiss our petition, argue that we don't have any law or facts on our side. Hopefully we get to have an evidentiary hearing, which is this little miniature trial, which is like this combination appeal and criminal trial, where we're putting on this evidence that we say would have changed the result at trial. And students are involved in all of that. Last quarter, we did one of these for a man who was convicted of a really terrible crime. And students put on a number of witnesses, a DNA expert, the client's sister, a medical expert. And the students put on these witnesses, did a great job, and we were successful. The court ordered a new trial for our client. And then one of the things that we'll do that some other projects won't is we'll do the trial. If the state is determined to reconvict this person, we'll represent them at the trial. We've done a handful of murder trials, and we'll involve students in those as well. The other thing we'll do then, like I said, the odds are against us. 9 times out of 10, we lose. And then we appeal. And students are involved in writing the appellate briefs and trying to get the trial court's order reversed. We also have to adapt, and we're creative, and we deal with whatever is happening in the moment, and we adjust. And I think we've done a lot of that with the COVID situation. We've been in court trying to get people bail. We've been going to the governor and trying to get clemency. We've been working with prisons to try to get people released. And we've had some success. I think we've had 2 or 3 people released, but a lot have not been released and are really vulnerable. And so we're trying to find new and creative ways to advocate for them so that they can hopefully have their day in court and their wrongful conviction won't turn into a death sentence. So Tyler's going to talk a little bit. He's a 2L now, 3L next year, about the work that he's been doing with us in the clinic. So Tyler, how about you tell what you've been working on?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things I really enjoyed about the clinic is that I've gotten to work on cases kind of at each stage. You know, I got to work on investigation last quarter that was really interesting, starting the investigation plans. But I think one of the most meaningful things I worked on was I got to draft, kind of the first go at an appeal for a trial, for a case that we're working on that was dismissed on a state's motion to dismiss. So in that case, sorry, my dog gets excited when I talk to myself. She thinks I'm going insane. But in that case, what happened was our client, Mr. Fields, was convicted of a double homicide on about the weakest possible evidence you can imagine. There was no physical evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, nothing like that, tying this man to the crime at the original trial. At the original trial, the court, the state presented two witnesses, both of whom actually testified that Mr. Fields did not commit the crime. And then the state proceeded to impeach them with statements they had made to police under coercion, where they had said earlier that he did. So all the jury heard tying Mr. Fields to this was that that these witnesses had said at one point he committed the crime, and then at the trial they said, well, that wasn't true, we were coerced. And so like Carl said, all that when you're doing a post-conviction, you can present as new things, so we couldn't talk about the police coercion. So what the project presented during this kind of early petition was 3 new witnesses who each testified that another guy committed the crime, kind of this renowned, known in the neighborhood bad guy. He was a gang shot caller, and it kind of got around that he had did it. But these 3 witnesses each are new. The project discovered him, and they talked about different things. One of the witnesses said, this guy who committed the crime, right afterwards, he came to my house. He told me, hey, I committed the crime. And this is new information that Mr. Fields didn't have at the trial. 2 other witnesses saw this guy fleeing the scene after they heard the shots fired. One of them saw him with a gun. And so, unfortunately, like Carl said, at the original kind of stage, the petition was filed. The state filed their motion to dismiss, and that was dismissed, the case. And the trial court was really out of bounds on that and making that decision. It went against kind of the set case law. He engaged in fact-finding, things like that at this kind of first level, you're not supposed to do. So I got to draft the I got to draft the brief for that. Got to turn it into Carl. Carl gave me a lot of great feedback on that, made the changes, and we submitted it. Got to talk to Mr. Fields. That's one of the most meaningful parts, was getting to talk to the clients, both at the investigation case early on and in this case. So really great writing experience. I recently got a clerkship, and a lot of the clerkship interview was talking about stuff I'd done on the Exoneration Project. One, because it's really, really interesting stuff. Judges want to hear about that. They have some interest, I think. And 2, because this was very relevant real world experience working on kind of appellate work. And so I can't speak highly enough about the experience I've had in the clinic, echoing what a lot of other people have said about how this clinic is really a great way to apply the law and to do it in a way that is meaningful, that you don't otherwise get in law school. So I would just really recommend you take a clinic, Exoneration in particular, working with Carl, working with Jost, these other attorneys, to help people really right a wrong that was done to them by the justice system by being away for all of these years for something they didn't do. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Thanks.
All right.
Tyler. So my info is in the chat. Reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Great. And I'm going to go ahead and put the names and emails of all the clinic directors in the chat once more. And I want to encourage you again also to reach out to us. I think all of us without exception have become clinical faculty because clinics were the most meaningful part of our law school experience. So we're happy to talk to you about what role clinics can play in yours. Okay, and last but certainly not least, Professor Conyers in the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Project Clinic. And then after she speaks, we will just end. Herschella?
Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Herschella Conyers, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Clinic. But let me say, I hate these meetings. Every year I hate these meetings because I want to go back to law school and join all these clinics, okay? And a lot of what I'm about to say, you've heard already from the other clinics. So I encourage you, like Tyler, to join a clinic, any clinic. But certainly you should try to join a clinic. So we're one of the older clinics. We started in 1991, and our focus is primarily on representing children and young adults accused of crime in state court. And when I say representing kids and young adults accused of crime, we handle mostly felony cases. We usually don't take misdemeanor cases because the consequences are not severe. They usually are manageable, and we take what now has been called Mandel cases. So we take kids who have been accused of murder. One of our first cases was a 10-year-old boy who was accused of throwing a 5-year-old boy out the window, which I'm sure some of you may have heard of. And those are the types of cases that we try. Again, what do the students do? They do everything that I do and that Professor Stone did when he was here. So they do trials, they do the investigation. We have, obviously, we hire a private investigator, but the students also go to the crime scenes. They interview witnesses, they prep, they moot, to the extent that they have, if they have their 3L license, which allows you to practice here, which you should have figured out by now, they will do parts of the trial. They will cross-examine witnesses, direct exams, arguments, opening, closing arguments, writing motions, pre-trial motions, and everything that a lawyer does, everything that a litigator does. So, and as I've indicated, we take serious cases, and the beauty of taking the more severe cases with consequences, with severe consequences, sometimes life consequences, and I'll talk about that more, is that I forgot which student said it, but I think it's true that after clinic, you're better able to be not just a better lawyer, but you're better able to be an adult and a human being in a very complicated world. So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? We have clients, historically, we have clients being held in the detention center, held in the county jail. Presently, I have a client in the county jail. The students have prepared a motion which will be argued next week or early next week, if not later this week, for a compassionate emergency release. This is the young man that was shot, being taken into custody. He has other injuries. There are mental health issues, and the county jail, I think there may be some other institutions that have surpassed it, but as of April 8th, the Cook County Jail had the highest COVID population per person in the country. They have had 7 deaths at the county jail. Our client is in the RTU unit based on his other injuries. So we are asking for his release. We will argue that the motion has been filed. The students prepared the motion in its entirety. They got resources. They talked to and a care plan for the client when he's out. All of those things were done by the students, and well done, I might add. So we will be working to get our client released pending trial based on the COVID. I have another client, just to give you an example, the juvenile cases we do, and as you may or may not know, juvenile cases are confidential. So I'm not gonna give you any names, but right now I have a 15-year-old client. And this is, I think the students would say, part of their work and what they get out of it is that when you're working with kids, you can watch them transform, but you can also learn about how difficult it is for some of our clients to make changes immediately. So I have a client that we have been working with since he was 12. He's 15 now. And the issue is our client is now on his 8th case. So what can we do for him? And one of the things that we do that separates us from other clinics in some ways, but certainly from the practice of criminal defense in large areas, is that we work in collaboration with a social worker and other mental health services, because we know that to keep the client out of the system is going to require more than just winning the case. And so what students do, they go to schools, they sit in on the any special hearings for schools, so they do some educational advocacy on behalf of our clients. They also help. Sometimes we are able to find appropriate placements in residential treatment facilities. Students will research those facilities and also work with the workers there, prepare reports that have to be filed with the court based on what the client is doing in a non-legal setting. So it's a wide range of things. And the clinic was originally founded to focus on, and it's still a great deal of our focus, competencies, fitness, and such as fitness to stand trial, ability to waive Miranda. So we do a lot of motion practice when it comes to our clients in terms of not just, the police aren't usually going to beat a client to get a confession out of her. But on how this impacts at the adolescent brain. So we do work with some medical specialists and trauma specialists that helps inform our practice as we do the hard work of going into a court, trying to convince, as Carl said, 12 reasonable people or one reasonable judge that our clients are innocent. So that and again, that takes up a great deal of time and energy for the students. And they also have a choice. If we have more cases than we can handle at any given time, students get to pick the cases that they want to work on, saying, why we should take this client over someone else. So they get to both pick the clients, and our only requirement is we only represent indigent clients. If someone is able to hire an attorney, we will not take their case. And in addition to the actual in-courtroom work that we do, we also do lots of policy work. And one of the things that we have worked on that we spent 20 years working on, again, just to give you an example, was juvenile life without parole. We finally won that battle in 2012 when the U.S. Supreme Court said in Miller versus Alabama, mandatory life for anyone who committed a crime under the age of 17 is unconstitutional. We had worked for years on that, and we continue to work on what we call the Miller issues as part of fair sentencing for children. One of the first things that we did in the Miller battle, we had two clients, students picked them out, both of whom had been sentenced to life, one at the age of 13 when the offense was committed, and one at the age of 15 when the offense was committed. And both of the clients, we took their Miller claims, we argued resentencing hearings for them, again, student participating fully, cross-examining guards from prisons, putting on family members, any number of things. But both of those clients were resentenced. And the one who had committed the offense when he was 13 years old, I had the pleasure of having lunch with him just before COVID hit. He had been released. He is now in his 30s, but he is out and free. So we got his sentence reduced to 60 years, and under the old statute, that was day for day. So instead of dying in prison, he is now a free man and still has enough years left. The other thing that we work on is we have closed in Illinois in collaboration with other institutions that work on this. We have closed approximately, I think, 8 juvenile prisons. And this work is, we do this as part of the board work that I do with the Juvenile Justice Initiative. And what's fascinating about this, one of my former students, clinic students, is now in fact in charge of the juvenile prisons in the state of Illinois. So that the policy work and the work that we do affords students opportunities to work in very different ways. And it affords students to, some of my best students, former students, are working in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. So it's not just that we talk about defense work and defending, but we talk about justice, how to make a better justice system from all of the players. So we work on expungement, fair sentencing for children, and detention and the need for less detention for children. And we do that. We work with people all across the country on those issues. Let me say this, if you've got some time, you should look up, get your pencils handy. You should look up Xavier, Xavier is his first name. His last name is McElrathbey. That's MC, capital ELRATHBEY. He is a former client of mine. He did you should look at his TED Talk. He's an extraordinary young man. But again, this was a 13-year-old that spent some time in prison on a homicide, but these are the types of clients that we try to take and try to work with. The other issues that we take cases on, again, these competency issues. We had a client who had an IQ of 41. The state prosecuted him. This case went on for about 4 years because we just would not stop. Finally, at the end of those 4 years, the case was in fact dismissed. The client is living in a home, a residential home. He is doing well and fine and dandy. So I just want to echo what everyone has said. The work that's done at the clinic is life-changing, both for our clients and for our students and for ourselves. In my mind, there's no such thing as a bad clinical experience. It's just where you think your interests might lie. And I encourage you to join us in whichever clinic you want. And again, my information is in the chat. I'll be happy to respond to people and to talk offline, over the phone, or however. So thanks for coming to the presentation.
All right, thanks. That's a good way to end us. And thanks to the presenters and to folks for joining us. And good luck with the few weeks remaining in your year.